Hello, everyone. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of The Book and Dagger, and welcome back to my channel. Today, this is going to be a special video. This is something new I'm going to start for my channel. I'm still going to have videos devoted to characters and book series that I love and movies and all that stuff. But today, we're going to be starting a read-along of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'll be mixing these videos in with my normal videos, and this is, first of all, I just want to say that it'll be an abridged reading along The Hobbit because this is not meant to be a substitute for you going out and either buying The Hobbit or watching the movies or anything like that. This is me. I love The Hobbit, and The Hobbit is really what got me into the world of Tolkien and really kind of what started my whole journey into loving fantasy and fiction. So I'm going to be doing a kind of read along of The Hobbit, with obviously some abridged version. So for copyright reasons and all that. Also, hopefully, if you are a Lord of the Rings fan, you love Middle Earth. Hopefully, you'll enjoy this series. And if you know nothing of The Hobbit, hopefully this series will inspire you to go pick up your own copy of The Hobbit at your local library or maybe your local bookstore and read it for yourself, and that will hopefully get you into Lord of the Rings and the Middle Earth universe. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into, we'll be going ahead and starting reading the first chapter of the Hobbit. So as you can see here, I have my own copy of The Hobbit with its beautiful artwork illustrated of Smaug on his pile of gold and Bilbo shrouded by invisibility by the ring that he found in the corner. So yeah, let's go and get right into it. The Hobbit is written by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is not meant to be a substitution of his work. Go support Tolkien. Go support Tolkien's work by going out and buying your own copy. If you really enjoy this, let's go ahead and get into the first chapter, which is called Chapter 1: An Unexpected Party. And this is beautiful because it opens up with in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. And I just want to go ahead and point out that the Hobbit movies they get a lot of hate, but it is interesting that when they do pull a lot from the lore, and this line is actually a very iconic one in the first movie of The Hobbit as well. But then the book goes on to proceed. It describes a hobbit hole, which it had a perfectly round door like a portal, painted green with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The next couple pages is about how hobbit holes are very luxurious. They've got bathrooms, lots of pantries, rooms for clothes, and then they talk a little bit about hobbits on this next page, which is basically Tolkien describes hobbits as being half of humans' height, with little or no magic about them, and they don't have beards, and they go around barefoot, and they like to dress in bright colors, and they like to eat 6 meals a day. And hobbits are notorious for not being fond of adventures. And the one hobbit that lives in this hobbit hole that he's talking about is Bilbo Baggins. And the Bagginses are an especially unadventurous group of hobbits. Now, Bilbo's mother actually was Belladonna Took, but she married Mr. Bungo Baggins, they were the parents of our main character in The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. So, and now the Tooks are actually, they're interesting because they're kind of adventurous hobbits. And Belladonna Took was actually one of the 3 daughters of the old Took, who was this really Tookish hobbit who went off on adventures. Anyway, so Bilbo, basically, his parents are dead, and he's living alone in his nice, luxurious hobbit home. And he's about 50. And one day, Bilbo is standing at his door after breakfast, smoking an enormous long wooden pipe that reached nearly down to his woolly toes, neatly brushed. Gandalf came by. Gandalf, if you have heard only a quarter of what I have heard about him, and I have only heard very little, Of all there is to hear, you would be prepared for any sort of remarkable tale. Tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went, in the most extraordinary fashion. He had not been down that way under the hill for ages and ages, not since his friend the old Took died, in fact, and the hobbits had almost forgotten what he looked like. He had been away over the hill and across the water on business of his own since they were all small hobbit boys and hobbit girls. All that the unsuspecting Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, a silver scarf over which his long white beard hung down below his waist, and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining, and the grass was very green. But Gandalf looked at him from under long, bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not, or that you feel good this morning, but that it is a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo, "and a very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors into the bargain. If you have a pipe about you, sit down and have a fill of mine. There's no hurry. We have all the day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on a seat by his door, crossed his legs, and blew out a beautiful gray ring of smoke that sailed up into the air without breaking and floated away over the hill. "Very pretty," said Gandalf, "but I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share in an adventure that I am arranging, and it's very difficult to find anyone." "I should think so, in these parts. We are plain, quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them," says our Mr. Baggins, and stuck one thumb behind his braces and blew out another, even bigger smoke ring. Then he took out his morning letters and began to read, pretending to take no more notice of the old man. He had decided that he was not quite his sort, and wanted him to go away. But the old man did not move. He stood leaning on his stick and gazing at the hobbit without saying anything, until Bilbo got quite uncomfortable and even a little cross. "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might try over the hill or across the water." By this he meant that the conversation was at an end. "What a lot of things you use good morning for," said Gandalf. "Now you mean that you want to get rid of me, and that it won't be good till I move off." "Not at all, my good sir, not at all. Let me see, I don't think I know your name." "Oh, yes, yes, my dear sir, and I do know your name, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, and you do know my name, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. To think that I should have lived to be good morning by Belladonna Took's son, as if I was selling buttons at the door." "Gandalf, Gandalf, good gracious me! Not the wandering wizard that gave old Took a pair of magic diamond studs that fastened themselves and never came undone till ordered? Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties about dragons and goblins and giants, and the rescue of princesses and the unexpected luck of widows' sons?" And then Bilbo proceeds to start talking about all these things that Gandalf used to do, including fireworks that Gandalf apparently is super good at and used to shoot off all the time for the hobbits. And then he says, "I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business." "What else should I be?" said the wizard. "At the same, I am pleased to find you remember something about me. You seem to remember my fireworks, kindly at any rate, and that is not without hope. Indeed, for your old grandfather Took's sake, and for the sake of poor Belladonna, I will give you what you asked for." "I beg your pardon, I haven't asked for anything," says Bilbo. And then Gandalf, in a funny twist and that shows how amazing J.R.R. Tolkien is, Gandalf says, "Yes, you have, twice now. My pardon. I give it to you." And then Gandalf says he is going to uh, show Bilbo Baggins that he shares no ill feelings towards him, and he's going to have him come along on the adventure with him. And Bilbo then proceeds to be like, "No thanks, sorry, I don't want any adventures." And he says, "But please come to tea anytime you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye." And then he turns around and scuttles inside his door and begins to ask why on earth he asked a wizard in for tea. And then Gandalf proceeds to stand outside Bilbo's door laughing quietly, and then he takes his staff and he scratches a sign onto Bilbo's door. And then he strides away. And Bilbo proceeds to then totally forget that he invited Gandalf to tea, and because he forgot to put on his engagement tablet. And so I need to say, tea time rolls around next day, and he gets a knock at the door. And then he remembers that he invited Gandalf over for tea, and he completely forgot about it. So he rushes to the door and shouts, "I am so sorry to keep you waiting." And then he saw it was not Gandalf at all. And he finds out it was a dwarf with a blue beard tucked into a golden belt and very bright eyes under his dark green hood. As soon as the door was opened, he pushed inside, just as if he had been expected. He hung his hooded cloak on the nearest peg, and "Dwalin, at your service," he said with a low bow. "Bilbo Baggins at yours," said the hobbit, too surprised to ask any questions for the moment. When the silence that followed had become uncomfortable, he added, "I am just about to take tea. Pray come and have some with me." A little stiff, perhaps, but he meant it kindly. And what would you do if an uninvited dwarf came in and hung his things up in your hall without your permission, without a word of explanation? And anyway, so they sit down, they eat at the table, and then there's another knock at the door. And Bilbo goes off to open the door. He's about to say, "So you have got here at last." But it's not Gandalf again, because it turns out it's a very old looking dwarf on the step with a white beard and a scarlet hood. And he too hopped inside just as the door was open, just as he had already been invited. And he says, "I see they have begun to arrive already." And he says, "Balin, at your service." "Thank you," says Bilbo with a gasp. It was not the correct thing to say, but "they have begun to arrive" had flustered him badly. He liked visitors, but he liked to know when they arrived, and he preferred to ask them himself. He had a horrible thought that the cakes might run short, and then he, as the host, he knew his duty, and stuck to it however painful he might have to go without. Anyway, so he invites this dwarf in and asks him for tea. Anyway, so he's going around all the dwarves, and pretty soon more knocks at the door come, and more dwarfs begin to come in. And Bilbo's running around, fetching all his food out of his pantry, giving it to them. Anyway, so there's Balin and Dwalin, and then he hears another knock at the door. It turns out two more dwarves named Feely and Keely pop over. And they walk in, and they're like, "Oh, I see Dwalin and Balin are already here." And so Baggins goes to sit down because he is not feeling good. He takes a sip of tea, and he hears another knock at the door. And it turns out to be more dwarves this time. It is Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, and Gloin. And they have two purple hoods, a gray hood, and a brown hood. And soon those are also, and a white hood. Those are also hanging on Mr. Baggins' wall soon. And Bilbo Baggins is now emptying his pantry, trying to feed the dwarves, and he hears another banging at the door. Only this time, it's a hard rat-tat-tat, like someone's banging it with a stick. So Bilbo is very angry and very flustered, and he runs down the passageway, and he jerks the door open, and four more dwarves fall in, and Gandalf is standing behind them laughing. And Gandalf then introduces Bifur, Bofer, Bomber, and Thorin Oakenshield to Bilbo. And they all go at your service with bows, and they come in, hang up their hoods, and then Bilbo is trying to apologize to Thorin, because Thorin is obviously very upset. So Bilbo is sitting there saying, I'm so sorry, and at your service," until Thorin grunts, "Pray don't mention it," and stops frowning. And then they proceed to sit down, and they ask what they're eating. And Gandalf goes, "Now we are all here. Quite a merry gathering. I hope there is something left for the latecomers to eat and drink. What's that? Tea? No, thank you. A little red wine, I think, for me." "And for me," says Thorin. "And raspberry jam and apple tart," says Bifur. "And minced pies and cheese," says Bofer. "And pork pie and salad," says Bomber. And as you can see, they're just going along, eating up all the food in this poor hobbit's house. "And more cakes and ale and coffee, if you don't mind," called the other dwarves through the door. "Put on a few eggs, that's a good fellow," Gandalf called after him as the hobbit stumped off to the pantries. "And just bring out the cold chicken and pickles." Seems to know as much about the inside of my larders as I do myself," thought Mr. Baggins. Anyway, so all these dwarves, there's now 13 dwarves in his house, and they're all sitting there's a bunch of dwarves in his house, and they're sitting around eating all his food. And then they actually give him a hand with the dishes, and they whisk them away, and they're tailing them so unconcernedly that Bilbo begins to worry that they're going to break them. So then the dwarves then proceed to sing a song making fun of Bilbo's fears. It goes, "Chip the glasses and crack the plates, blunt the knives and bend the forks. That's what Bilbo Baggins hates. Smash the bottles and burn the corks. Cut the cloth and tread on the fat. Pour the milk on the pantry floor. Leave the bones on the bedroom mat. Splash the wine on every door." And of course, they proceed to do none of these things, and they put the dishes away as clean and great as if Bilbo had done it himself. And then they proceed to bring out musical instruments, and they start singing a song that is really beautiful and really good. And it goes, "Far over the misty mountains cold." I'm not going to attempt to sing that because I'm just going to butcher it because I don't have a good singing voice. Anyway, they sing about "Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. The dwarves of yore made mighty spells, while hammers fell like ringing bells, in places deep where dark things sleep, in hollow halls beneath the fells." And there's a lot more to it. But it's really beautiful and really great, and it's Tolkien just flexing, showing, "Oh yeah, I can rhyme and make songs." Anyway, so it says as they're singing, Bilbo feels the love of beautiful things made by hands and by cunning and by magic moving through him, a fierce and jealous love, the desire of the hearts of dwarves. Then something tookish woke up inside of him, and he wished to go and see the great mountains and hear the pine trees and the waterfalls. Anyway, So then Gandalf and Thorin then proceed to explain why they're here. Thorin gets up and he says, Gandalf, dwarves, and Mr. Baggins, we are met together in the house of our friend and fellow conspirator, the most excellent and audacious hobbit. May the hair on his toes never fall out. All praise to his wine and ale. He paused for breath and for a polite remark from the hobbit, but the compliments were quite lost on poor Bilbo Baggins, who was wagging his mouth in protest of being called audacious, and worst of all, fellow conspirator. Though no noise came out, he was so flummoxed. So Thorin goes on. We are met to discuss our plan, our ways, means, policy, and devices. We shall soon, before the break of day, start on a long journey, a journey from which some of us, or perhaps all of us, except our friend and counselor, the ingenious wizard Gandalf, may never return. And then so Thorin starts this long speech, but Bilbo is very frightened, so he starts screaming, and basically so they carry him out of the room and lay him on a couch. And basically then Bilbo is laying on the couch and hears some of the dwarves saying, oh, maybe this isn't the guy we should bring on our quest. So then they're like, I doubt him. And so Bilbo gets mad, and the Tookish part of him wakes up again. And so he goes in and he says, basically he goes in and he says, pardon me, I don't understand anything you guys are saying, but if you want something done, let me do it, and I will prove to you that I'm capable of doing it. And basically, then he finds out that the dwarves are trying to retake their mountain, which was taken over by the evil dragon Smaug, and Thorin is the rightful king under the mountain, which is the title the dwarves give to the guy who rules the mountain. And so basically the dwarves are trying to go and take back their kingdom from the evil dragon. But they don't know if they can kill the dragon. So they're gonna, if they can't do that, they need to hire a burglar to sneak into the mountain and steal all the treasure out from under the dragon's nose. And they've decided to do Bilbo, or Gandalf decided it would be Bilbo, because hobbits are very light on their feet and very sneaky. Anyway, so they have a key, and there's a secret door they know in the mountain that they're going to use, because Gandalf has the key and he gives it to Thorin. And then they start talking about their plan, how they're going to go there, and then there's a long, detailed account of how Smaug came and killed a bunch of dwarves. And basically, Thorin has sworn revenge against Thorin and dwarves have sworn revenge against Smaug. They say they're gonna take it back, and then basically they're like, "Oh well, we'll go tomorrow, but first of all, we need food and we need sleep." So they all say, "Oh, we're gonna spend the night here," and then the dwarves all start giving their breakfast orders to Bilbo, and Bilbo's very annoyed because the dwarves are all just saying, "Oh," like Thorin goes. He goes, I agree about bread and breakfast. I like 6 eggs with my ham when starting on a journey. Fried, not poached, and mind you don't break them. Anyway, so they all order their breakfast without so much as a please, which annoyed Bilbo very much. And they all go to bed. As Bilbo goes to bed, he can hear Thorin singing the song about Misty Mountains, and this makes him very upset and nervous and wishing he had just kept his mouth shut.